Yeah, kind of going into the Indian example. I mean, the overarching kind of theory from the book so far, at least from what I've read, is that kind of like empires sow the seeds of their own downfall.
Yeah,
And that's not necessarily in the way that you think of it being, you know, them getting too complacent about something or the other, but it's almost an inevitable course that is semi unavoidable, really, because as empires grow, they control different areas and they control different civilizations, they control different kinds of people. But over time, it's inevitable that they will develop these regions to suit their own interests, because the more developed that a colony is or a region of an empire is, the more economically beneficial it is to
yeah,
control.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, India was one of the most profitable, kind of regions for the British Empire. Obviously, referred to as the jewel in the crown, or the jewel in the empire. I can't remember the exact phrase.
Jewel in the crown.
Um,
Yeah, that you
yeah,
got it right first
yeah,
time.
jewel in the crown. Yeah, but obviously, it's inevitable that over time empires will develop the regions that will then cause their demise, because they're able to then rival and break away from the empire, as
Yeah,
we saw in the British Empire. And
yeah,
obviously, the way that the modern, like the British Empire, played out is different to how the Roman Empire played out in different ways. But the theory is the same for both. Rome
yeah,
developed other regions that became more developed over time through trade or other interactions with that empire, became advanced. They became able to challenge the Rome militarily, economically, whatever. In the British Empire, Britain conquered different parts of the world, exploited them for resources, so on and so forth. Over time, like we mentioned before, there were people for like Indian citizens that were then taken to the UK and given British education. They were taught about philosophy, politics, other things like that they then took back home. There were entrepreneurs that
yeah,
Indian entrepreneurs that developed massive business empires and even spread to Europe and traded with Europe as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and
And it
over
kind of
time,
challenges that hegemony that we, the British and the Dutch and the rest of them, had kind of had for so long with our various East India companies. Um, it's that sort of, well, we want to develop them so that we can use them, but then they're actually going to do things themselves and they're going to become a threat.
and that's the thing, you can't stop that progress, because if you want, like, these things are
Yeah,
developed in the view of making the empire stronger, but the things that
yeah,
make the empire stronger also ironically make it weaker by developing
yeah.
autonomy in other regions. So I think that
You're
was
you're
that
sort
was
of
kind
you're
of
sort of you're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't, aren't you? Because if you do rule with an iron fist and you subjugate the people and you just extract resources and you don't teach them anything, then they're going to revolt and they're going to uprise against you,
mm,
rise up against you rather, and it's so either way it's going to come to an end for you. It's either going to come to an end positively in the sense that you've built them up, well, not positively for you, but in the sense that you've given them what the tools they need to develop, or they're going to turn those tools against you,
mm.
or you clamp down on their ability to develop those tools, and they rise up and say, well, we want to live a decent life too, and you're not letting us, so off with you.
Well, I think as well, when you look at kind of how the world was changing, especially in terms of I mean, again, you see the parallels between the late Roman world, and also the more modern world as well, where Germanic tribes went from being very separate tribes to being confederations to then being kind of more interested in forming nation, or not necessarily like the nation state, but forming its own kind of country in a way,
Yeah,
at the time. And then obviously in the colonial era, you had countries that they were colonized by European powers, and then over time developed their own industry and their economies, and really had that need to be independent again, and to have their own have their own choice over what they use their
yeah,
resources on, and freedom to do what they want as a country and stuff like that. So
yeah,
obviously, in the case of the British Empire, and other colonial empires in Europe, from Europe, after the two world wars, it was almost impossible to maintain the status quo because both all the European empires, especially the British Empire, had sacrificed so many people from different nations that were part of the empire. They couldn't ask them to do any more after two world wars. I think there was,
Yeah.
I don't know the exact number of like Indian soldiers that fought for on behalf of Britain.
It's huge.
It was millions of troops. And also the Anzac forces, Australia and New Zealand, they sacrificed massive amounts of people, and the effects of the wars on those people who then had to go back to the Australia and New Zealand. It changes demographics, the kind of scale that we're talking about. So you can perfectly understand how these countries were so like, we've done our part now, let us go.
Yeah. And you couldn't, and even if you wanted to just say, oh, thanks a lot, that was very nice. Now back, everything's as it was, and forget
back to the workhouse.
Even if you tried to do that, they would go, well, no. It's a bit like the lot of women changing through the world wars. They, the number of divorces goes rockets after the Second World War in this country, in Britain, because women have learnt so much they've gone out and they've worked, and they've formed these kind of sisterly bonds, and they've worked out that they don't just need to rely on their men all the time, and so they go, well, hang on a minute, I don't actually like the way I'm being treated by such and such who's just come back from war. I think I'll dump him, actually. And so so if you translate that over to empire terms, it's populations who are now kind of are now sort of wise to the world and what it's giving them, and they go, well, actually, no, I don't fancy just doing that anymore. So it's a fait accompli. Either you say to them, like we did with India and the partition with Pakistan and all the rest of it. Either you say to them, okay, here you go, do it yourselves now. We accept that you want to do that, or you don't. You say, no, actually, we want to carry on, and they go, actually, no. Now that we know a bit more about everything and we know what we're doing, we're gonna get rid of you. So it's that you can't put the jack back in the box.
No. I mean, also an important note to that as well would be when doing kind of those partitions, not to just draw arbitrary lines on maps when you don't know anything about the regions or the people who live there, as Britain and France did. So there's a lot of consequences to. I mean, again, like Middle East, you can kind of look at it and be like, well, one way or another is probably either our fault or the French. So.
And similarly to an extent, not so much with arbitrary drawing lines on a map, although it's similar in Africa. You get the descent into warlordism comes out of maybe not having successfully equipped the people to govern themselves, and so a power vacuum opens up, and in steps malign actors.
Well, in the case of Africa as well, you have to also consider the fact that, like, pre-colonial era, a lot of African societies were nomadic. So all of a sudden,
it's tribes again, isn't it? It's like the Germanic tribes. It's all the tribes.
Yeah, but it's like all of a sudden, when you're used to, as a society, traveling around and never being in one place for too long, you're all of a sudden penned in because of some arbitrary lines on a map. Yeah. It's not easy to do that, but also it takes understanding of the regions. It takes understanding of other things. Like there's a whole load of different things that we could discuss on that. And
then Rwanda, the issues in Rwanda, which we touched on when we were talking about genocide a few episodes ago, all stem from this arbitrary tribal distinction that is actually that's kind of invented by the Belgians between the Tutsis and the Hutus. And it's and that, of course, wreaks total havoc once they leave, because it benefits them while they're there to say, okay, the Tutsis are the sort of aristocratic ones who are kind of higher up, and the Hutus are lower down, and all the rest of it. And then, of course, it's all the nonsense. It's all a fabrication, or it's a building on a sort of grain of something. But it's they blow it up, and then, of course, the Rwandans themselves take it very seriously, or the Hutus do take it very seriously, and decide. Well, actually, now we want the shoe on the other foot, and we're gonna now that the Belgians are out of the way, we're gonna take care of the Tutsis. And of course, you
Mm.
get, in terms of the speed, obviously the Holocaust is the ultimate crime against humanity, but in terms of the speed of um, genocide, I think Rwanda takes the cake for
Mm.
just the sheer kind of, not in not in overall raw numbers, but just in the brutality with which it's
Well, yeah,
executed.
it's horrific. I mean, yeah.
So again, it's a sort of strange one, that, because you're talking about tribal units, but sort of artificially, or certainly artificially inflated units that
Mm.
that a previous colonial power has put in place because it suits them, and then they've buggered off, and all hell's broken loose. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I do actually think. I mean, I've said it multiple times already. Like, I find it fascinating how kind of the same way, like methods of almost downfall kind of play out in the same way, pretty much. Even though there's a difference in the technology, there's a difference in the world order, there's a difference in kind of like the people doing it and stuff like that. Like, it plays out in a similar way most of the time.